Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us for today's Idaho Falls Rotary program. My name is Lindsay Roman-Q. I'm a past president of our Idaho Falls Rotary Club. I'm filling in today for our current president, Liza Leonard. Rotary is an international service organization. We have approximately 1.2 million members worldwide. Our motto is service above self. We are the Idaho Falls Rotary Club, and we're always accepting new members. So if you're interested in joining, please reach out to us. Before we get to today's program, we have some club business. This month, we're doing a few new things. We're trying to focus our efforts on supporting local businesses who have supported our club and our service projects, specifically the duck race in the past. So this month, we're encouraging our members to eat at Smoke and Fins, either dine in or take out. And if you do go to Smoke and Fins, please let them know you're a Rotarian and that we appreciate their support of the duck race in the past. And we hope our local businesses can feel our support through these programs. This month, we have an exciting event for Rotarians and their families. On Wednesday, March 31st, we're having Rotarian Family Night at the Museum with the Museum of Idaho. So that evening, we'll have the museum exclusively for Rotarians and their families, and we'll be able to safely enjoy the museum from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. And then finally, please mark your calendars for Wednesday, April 14th, when we'll be doing our annual Idaho Falls Parks and Rec Greenbelt Cleanup Project starting at 5:30 p.m. So please mark your calendars, plan to come out to that cleanup project with your families. And with that, I will turn the time over to our program chair for this month, Mayor Rebecca Casper.
Thank you so very much, Lindsay. Ever since 2014, I have contended that the city of Idaho Falls is one of, if not the most complex city in the state to manage. And I have some reasons for that, and I won't go into them all right now, but part of that is due to the two departments that we will be focusing on today and next week. Today, we're going to be hearing from the Idaho Falls Airport, and next week we'll be hearing from Bear Prairie, the general manager of Idaho Falls Power and the Idaho Falls Fiber Network. And let me just add a little bit to that. There are only 9 cities out of the 199 cities in Idaho that operate a power department. And of those 9, only 1 generates power, and that would be Idaho Falls Power. And similarly, when it comes to operating commercial airports, only 6 cities in Idaho do that, and Idaho Falls is one of those. And we are, I believe, the second busiest airport, or the one with the second most enplanements, or people who board a plane and fly out of our airport. So I think it makes it interesting for Rotarians to be more aware of these complex departments and some of the work and what that they do and the environment that they work in. I have sort of an unofficial little motto that always resonates in my mind when I think of Rotary and my colleagues here in this community and Rotary. But it might make a T-shirt someday. But it's when you educate a Rotarian, good things happen. And I really feel like educating the members of our club about the work of our airport or our power department are it's a good idea because it will yield a very good fruit. Because the more that consumers and citizens and residents and taxpayers know, the more that they'll be able to make informed decisions. So with that, I'll tell you that when I first came into city leadership, my understanding of the airport was not unlike the people I encounter today in the community who will come up to me and tug on my sleeve and they'll say, Mayor, we really want a flight to somewhere, and they'll name their favorite destination city. And sometimes I'll smile and say, okay, that's good to know, but I can't make promises on the spot because that's not how airlines or airports work. It's not that. So anyway, I had to undergo quite a learning curve when I first came into office about commercial air service, and it is actually a robust marketplace, but my learning curve was tricky until I understood who the players were in the marketplace. Who are the buyers and who are the sellers? And if you understand that, then it becomes a little easier to wrap your mind around how to run the airport. It makes it very difficult to answer or to respond to someone who says, "Hey, Mayor, I want a flight to Tuscaloosa," because it takes a 25-minute presentation to really help them understand why that might not ever happen. But anyway. Who are the buyers and the sellers? The buyers, or the marketplace, consists of people who buy airline tickets and travel and using them, and people who sell those tickets, or the airlines themselves. Not the city and not city leaders. We are not able to just put in a request and if we get lucky, or if we're charming enough, or if we're forceful enough, it'll just come right through. No. Our role is entirely different. In the marketplace, our role is to make Idaho Falls attractive in all the other ways that airlines need to be wooed. Good service behind the scenes, good rates for fuel, good fees for what is normally charged for just the basic services they get when they come in and need to have the plane taken care of, de-iced, all of those kinds of things. If we do a good job there, plus we have good amenities that attract lots of passengers, we can make our community more attractive, or our airport more attractive to an outside vendor, so that if they're picking among equals in the marketplace, they would land on choosing Idaho Falls. So the airport plays a role, but it more or less facilitates the marketplace exchange between the passengers and the airlines themselves. And so understanding that marketplace makes it much easier to understand how we attract service. We attract service by having good data and knowing which markets are important to our flyers. And when we know that, then we can start doing that outreach and start developing those relationships with those airlines that are likely to provide that, develop that route with us. And so there's a lot more to it, but understanding the basics really helped me, and I'm hoping that it will help you. So we have a treat then with Director Rick Cloutier here today. He's going to go into some detail, explain some things, give us some previews of what's coming. And he'll be willing to answer questions. So if you do have questions that come up, feel free to put those in the Facebook chat, and we'll try to get to as many of them as we can. We'll take as long as we need before our hour's up. So let me tell you a little bit about Director Cloutier. When we went to hire him, we were looking for someone who really could develop air service. That was a talent that we were looking for, a strength on the resume, so to speak. And we found it, I believe, and we were looking for it. Rick Cloutier, he serves as, obviously, the director of the Idaho Falls Regional Airport. Prior to this, he worked as the assistant director of airports, plural, for Horry County in Myrtle Beach in the South Carolina's airport system. He has over 25 years' experience in transportation and in aviation. He knows everything about planes, from the management of the airport side to the operations side behind the scenes to even just aircraft maintenance. So he understands all aspects, I think, of air travel in a way that makes him a stronger leader. He is a certified member of the American Association of Airport Executives. He also serves as a board member on the U.S. Contract Tower Association Board and as a board member of the American Association of Airport Executives Small Airports Committee. And there are lots of different levels of airports. They don't just have small, medium, and large. And so Rick might touch on that too. But anyway, Rick also has a military background. He is a former Marine. He has 20 years of service to our country in that role. And I imagine you'll just really enjoy hearing from him today. And let's get those questions coming. Thank you. Rick, it's all yours.
Mayor Casper, thank you. Well, hello. I don't think we can ever get used to this delivery method, but it'll be very interesting. Hopefully, we don't have to continue these things in the future. As the mayor said, my name is Rick Cloutier. I'm the airport director of the Idaho Falls Regional Airport. It's been my pleasure to be here for about 3 years now. It's a great place to work and a great place to live, so we definitely enjoy it. The first things I'd like to start out with is trying to explain the structure of the airport a little. As the mayor suggested, education is really a key component to the airport. So the airport is owned by the city of Idaho Falls. The city of Idaho Falls is the sponsor enterprise fund. So we are kind of a separate fund, separate accounts from like the rest of the city. We take no general fund dollars for operations at all. So none of your tax dollars come to pay anything at the airport. We're self-sufficient upon ourselves. So we're very proud of that. And many airports, especially in Idaho, can say that. So we're very excited. Just to give you a little recap of 2020, as we all know, it was just a very strange year. I think we could all agree that one of the hardest hit industries in the nation, or in the world, really was aviation. It's probably the worst hit to aviation in history, much worse than even the economic downturns of the 2008s and 2010s. It's about a 50% worse than that during that time. Overall passenger rates declined from the previous year, nationwide 70 to 90%. So that's millions and millions of passengers a day not traveling, not part of the airport system. So it really impacted every airport in the country. We were very fortunate, if you can say that, for 2020. We fared better than most airports in the country. We actually ended up 2020 at about 62% of our passengers from the 2019 level. And 2019 was a record year for the number of passengers we had. So we're very fortunate to that. So we're glad that happened, and we're looking to go forward. But also, in addition to passengers and commercial air service at the airport has many, many other things supported at the airport. Of course, all of our general aviation traffic, business leaders traveling here on their business aircraft to start new business, look at new businesses. Cargo. We do about 2 million pounds of cargo a year passing through the airport. 2 million tons of cargo a year passing through the airport. So if anybody gets either a UPS or a FedEx, next day or second day air packages, of course, all the things that we order online now, all those things come through the airport. So, people are using the airport every day if they're ordering from Amazon. We have air ambulance, we have security services, we have many businesses at the airport. And all the businesses that are based at the airport, whether the airline businesses, the general aviation businesses we have, the aircraft maintenance businesses, electronics, we have over 350 employees, non-city employees that work at the airport. So it makes a huge economic impact on the region. Actually, the Idaho Department of Transportation completed a economic impact study for the year of 2019, and the Idaho Falls Airport has an economic impact of $145 million a year annually to the region. So we're very proud of that. But with that, we faced the challenges in 2020, and we, hopefully we're hitting them head on. We do have a lot of exciting news right now. If you've been to the airport recently, you've seen that we have a huge construction project going on with our terminal construction. We'll be going from 2 to 6 gates, departure gates. We'll be adding about 30,000 square feet of terminal space. Going to be additional gate hold areas, additional gates, new security screening areas. If you've been out there recently, you see that our new TSA screening area is open. It's much more user-friendly than before. It's a much larger, more well-lit area. Restaurant space. So we're very excited that this project is going on right now, and we expect to be completed around the end of summer. So it's just in time for all the things going on in Idaho Falls and the region. In the last about 2 months, we have announced 4 new routes and 2 new airlines that'll start serving Idaho Falls this summer. Allegiant will have an additional route to Portland, Oregon. So that they'll give them 6 Allegiant routes that they fly throughout the year. American Airlines will start service for the first time since the 1980s in Idaho Falls with 2 new routes, one direct flight to Phoenix and one direct flight a day to Dallas-Fort Worth. That gives you many hundreds of one-stop connections around the world through the American system. And we're really excited. One of the most requested routes that I've heard since I've been here is Alaska Airlines will start direct service to Seattle on June 17th. So that's a very exciting route. It'll give us great connectivity to, the West Coast and points west, including Alaska. So with the addition of these airlines and these routes, the Idaho Falls region will be served by 5 airlines and 12 nonstop routes. That is the second most of any airport in the state, and by far the most of any airport in eastern Idaho. And not only does adding new routes and having new connections, give us connectivity to the world, allows our residents to travel easier, allows people to visit Idaho Falls more, maybe as their gateway to Yellowstone or the Tetons, but it also introduces economic competition in the market. And the more airlines that we add, the competition, just like, anything else, so it'll help stabilize our fares to be competitive with the rest of the country. So we're very excited about that. And all these exciting things didn't happen overnight. As Mayor Casper alluded to, air service development is something that takes years and years to get. We have been working on these routes that we announced in the last few months for the 3 years I've been here. So it takes a lot of time to work with the airlines to get them to start new service. You've got to think about that the airlines have limited resources. There's only a finite number of aircraft available, a finite number of pilots available, and a lot of competition out there. There are 550 commercial service airports in the country, all trying to fight for that one more route that we're trying to do every day with that, limited resources that the airlines have. The airlines have very deep strategies they use. Where are they going to put their resources the best they can use them? What are the best served markets with the most potential for success, obviously? Where can they use the aircraft and the crews the best? Do they have the right type of aircraft to serve the market? Depends on the size of the markets. Depends on where they're going, the length of the route, the cost. How much does it cost for fuel, people, the amenities at the airport, all the cost that goes in. They really evaluate every new route, and they obviously make decisions on where they will make the most money. The airlines are private companies. Until recently, were not subsidized by the government. So they're obviously in business to make money, and they're going to do it where they can the best. So with that, it takes a lot of time to develop these relationships, but the airlines are very risk averse. Because any new market it creates a lot of risk and a lot of cost to start a new market with hiring people, equipment, and all those type of things. So they look for ways to mitigate some of that risks. And one of the biggest things is that, is revenue guarantees. It's become, the norm for airports and cities and communities to, come up with these revenue guarantees to help mitigate some of the risk. Contracts with the airlines guarantee a certain amount of revenue. If they don't make that, then you help offset some of the costs. But if they do either exceed that or, break even, then there's no cost to the communities. And I think for the first time ever that I can find in the history of the airport, we've been able to do that this year with the assistance of the city. They've agreed to a revenue guarantee for Alaska Airlines, so that really was a big thing in helping them decide to come to Idaho Falls. And with that, I mean, we have, there's a lot of interesting things. Of course, 2020 is kind of a different animal, but in 2019, we had an average of, because as we said, they have limited resources, and things have changed a lot in the airlines over the last 20 or 30 years. I mean, in the 1980s, we had 30 plus major air carriers in the world, in the country. Right now, we have 8 major carriers that provide service throughout the country and internationally. So that's a lot of competition for airports. And we're looking to, again, continue to assess where our travelers are going, where's the best served markets. The city really has stepped up to assist the airport and really attract those markets. We're also, one thing I'd like to talk about today is the airport and the city is putting together a Air Service Development Advisory Committee of business leaders from the community, travel professionals, anybody who has an interest in attracting air service. We'll be putting that together over the next few weeks and hopefully have a committee that helps us and helps the city attract and retain air service. So anybody interested in that, you can either contact me or the mayor or any of your council members about those things. So, kind of in closing, that it's as the mayor said, things just don't happen overnight. Attracting air service is a difficult task, and we're working towards it every day. One of the biggest questions I get, and I'll, try to head it off right now, is the Boise challenge. We often get the question is why we don't have flights to Boise. And I was fortunate enough through this last year, I sat on a legislative committee that studied interstate air service and traveled between specifically about 8 different places in Idaho to Boise. But of course, Idaho Falls is one of the main places studied. And it just, the cost of providing service, the type of aircraft needed to provide service, it just makes it very difficult for that. If you think about an aircraft flying to Boise, if you had a size of it, it's like an 8-passenger aircraft that flew to Boise, that cost about $1,500 an hour to operate. It would be about $375 round trip. So any type of flights of those type of things to Boise would definitely require some kind of long-term subsidies from the state that would ensure that the service is going to be maintained. And it just is really looking at the type of aircraft available, the airlines we have available now. Securing that Boise service is difficult, but with the help of the state and other entities, we're going to continue to look at it and see what we can do in the future. So I guess we can open it up to questions, and I'll.
All right, so Rick and I are just going to go back and forth here, but there is a lot of new vocabulary to learn, right? Air service development is, attracting new airlines. For example, that's a new phrase. But Rick, if you could just take a minute and clarify, because I think it can be very easy to mix these words up, and yet they have very specific meanings in air service speak. Can you give us clarity on the difference between a subsidy and a guarantee, a revenue guarantee?
Yes, and that is very different. A subsidy is something that would be required long-term investment from something to make the service successful long-term, probably in perpetuity. A revenue guarantee is just a guarantee that somebody makes with an airline that allows them to break even and make a certain amount of profit on each flight, but nothing more than that. So in their short-term guarantees, normally 1 to 2 years. So basically just ensuring that the airline breaks even and doesn't lose a whole lot of money in revenue guarantees. But a subsidy is a long-term investment or a long-term drop of money that would require probably forever.
And so, if I'm not mistaken, the idea of a revenue guarantee, they're meant to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Temporary in nature, but they're countenanced, or people don't balk at them because it takes time for a route to be established. You don't just announce a route and then the next day have everybody lined up who wants to use it forevermore. It often takes a couple of months or even years for people to become accustomed to the idea that they can travel from this spot to this spot, and they don't have to drive to Salt Lake to get that deal or whatever. So I think it's important to understand there is a time frame sometimes involved in establishing a route, and the airlines, from their perspective, rightfully say, hey, if I'm going to take the risk on coming to your community, you need to have some skin in the game and help us so that we don't lose our shirts in the process. And so, but when I first learned about this in this marketplace that I'm trying to understand, when I first learned about it, it almost sounded to me like that airlines wanted either a subsidy, or they wanted greedily they wanted a bribe or something to be able to stay. And then I started softening a little bit, and then I thought, well, it's like a gray market. They're just demanding this money. But it is so firmly established that the federal government even offers grants to help small communities come up with these subsidies. Will you tell us a little bit about those grants, what they're called, what the acronym stands for, and fix anything I just said that may not be correct?
Yeah, so the revenue guarantees are widely accepted around the nation, and as the mayor said, they're actually accepted by the federal government. There are probably 90% of all new routes have some sort of revenue guarantee, an incentive program at any airport. But as she said, they're short-term to allow the service to mature, to ensure everybody has risk in the game, and we're all sharing the risk. But we do have grant programs, the Small Community Air Service Development Grant programs, that are specifically for these type of guarantees. It helps offset the cost for the start of service. Recently, there was the SCASD was advertised, and the grant submission was due back at the beginning of March. And these are very competitive grant programs. So this year, there's over $78 million in grant funding requested, but there's only $18 million in grant funding available. So they're very competitive. There was 112 grants requested. Only about 10 to 12 airports a year get these grants. But if you're successful in this grant program, you can use it for revenue guarantees, incentives to help attract airlines.
All right. Thank you. And so you have touched on the one of the questions that we often get. Why can't I fly to Boise? And then another couple of questions we get are, well, it's cheaper for me to fly out of Salt Lake. And so I know that you've touched a little bit on how having more service out of our airport will naturally have an impact over time on the rates that are being charged out of our airport, as all of those airports compete for Idaho Falls passengers. So in a way, it will become, I think, cheaper to stay here, fly out of here, than it will be to drive to Salt Lake. But can you talk a little bit about this concept of leakage, right? When our market, the people who would naturally live in our area, when some of them do drive. So give you a lot of things to touch on. So touch on that. Touch on the whole Pocatello Airport relationship and their role in what it has been and how it may be evolving somewhat. And then there's the 4-hour concept, the 4-hour drive rule that was highlighted in a study that the state did. Can you just maybe, all of those interrelate?
So leakage translate to how many of our passengers, we have what we call catchment areas around each airport. So anything within a 60-minute drive of the Idaho Falls Regional Airport is our catchment area. It's kind of recognized by the Department of Transportation as our catchment area. And obviously that catchment area is further away, kind of up and down the highway corridors than it is towards the east and the west when the roads get more difficult to travel. So as I kind of said, touched upon it, in 2019, we completed a study. We had about 1,300 passengers a day in that catchment area, which 60 minutes from here includes kind of the Pocatello area also. So we had about 1,300 passengers a day each way that were traveling from that catchment area. And you would think the Idaho Falls Airport's the closest, you would receive it all. But we leak a certain percentage to other airports. And a lot of this is from the fringes of our areas. But our major competitor for leakage is Salt Lake City. As I said, out of that 1,300 passengers, we kept about 54% every day. About 40% leaked to Salt Lake to get on different flights. And obviously, because that's a lot cheaper. So you got to think of Salt Lake as like a big business. Of course, it's going to be somewhat cheaper on face value to fly out of Salt Lake because you're taking one flight out of the equation. It's like it's like renting a car or getting a bus ticket from here to Salt Lake, but you only want to pay from Ogden to Salt Lake. So you're taking one whole trip out of the equation. So, of course, there's going to be a little more cost there involved. But also, supply and demand, all of our flights were full. So, and as I said, 40% of our leakage, people leaking to other airports, was to Salt Lake. Only about 2%, 4 to 5 a day, go to Pocatello. We actually get more of their leakage for us than Pocatello does. And I think that is because, especially of lately, I check all the time. The fares are very competitive between the two airports now, but we have a lot more service to offer than just the 2 flights a day to Salt Lake. As I said, currently we have 8 different destinations. Come this summer, we'll have 12 destinations. So I think that'll really regulate itself, and hopefully we'll even have less leakage. And I think we talked about Boise. That's one more. Yes. Boise, yeah. So the airlines and kind of the industry uses a 4-hour drive time about competition between airplanes and cars. And you really got to look at that is people are going to probably choose to drive if it's 4 hours or less than get on a plane to do it. Because if you think about it's a hassle to get on a plane. You got to come to the airport. You've got to go through security. You've got to wait for your flight. You've got to get off your plane. You have to get your rental car, get your transportation. So that time difference of less than 4 hours is very small. And when you factor in just the increased cost difference, because, it's $1,500 at least an hour to operate a plane, that cost difference is just never going to make it up. So that's kind of what the 4-hour drive time alludes to.
There's still time to add your questions to Facebook if you have them. But I'm gonna keep going based on questions I've generated from years of fielding them from members of the community. Real quick one: why is it that our airport is so successful with keeping people from our catchment area? Why are we able to fill our planes? What's the secret sauce that makes it so that we have that 80-90% enplanement?
Well, I think pre-2020, I think our connectivity to different routes and having more availability than many other airports in Eastern Idaho helped it. We also had a large business travel market at that time. Obviously, we know we have a large energy industry here that does a lot of travel. We have a lot of businesses here in the tech industry. Our tech industry is growing every day. They provided quite a bit of our travel during kind of COVID. But for 2020, I think we were very fortunate that we were financially positioned. The airport has no debt. We kind of build things as we go. So we had no debt. We were able to make some decisions to protect ourselves during the downturn. But I don't think it downturned in the studies we've been doing. The downturn wasn't as bad here because we were fortunate to fall into the year of the great outdoors. People still wanted to go on vacation. People still wanted to do things and get out of their homes. So the area around Idaho Falls definitely is very attractive to that. An hour and a half to Yellowstone, Grand Tetons, some of the best, fishing in the nation. So we were just fortunate that we were able to retain passengers that were traveling here for the outdoor experience and helped offset what we lost with our business traveler.
Thank you. I do think the business traveler is an interesting concept because those aren't necessarily going away. Even as post-pandemic, we're starting to see with these new routes perhaps the emergence of even more of the individual traveler as well. So it's kind of exciting to think about our growth. Rick, we had learned in an airport-related city council meeting that there, with just a little more, and this was before the pandemic, but with just a little more travel, Idaho Falls would have been bumped into a different category of airport, according to how the FAA kind of categorizes airports. Is that something that you can just highlight and explain a little bit about?
Sure.
Thank you.
Without getting too deep into numbers, the FAA recognizes basically 5 different type of airports. You have 4 different kind of commercial service airports. So you have the large hubs, small hubs, large hubs, medium hubs, small hubs, and non-hub airports. And that's determined by the percentage and the number of passengers every year compared to the number of passengers in the nation. So a certain percentage, if you have, say, 1% of all passengers that travel in the nation, you fall into the large hub, and a certain percentage. So the Idaho Falls Airport, anything under 250,000 enplanements, not necessarily passengers coming and going, but enplanement is somebody getting on a plane here and going someplace else. That's how the FAA and TSA kind of categorizes things. So over 250,000 enplanements, people getting on planes here, would bump us from a non-hub to possibly a small hub, and then from a different category of, and it all depends on number of passengers that year and all those type of things, and a different category of TSA security also that might increase some of our security levels. So again, we feel obviously during 2020 and probably 2021, that won't happen, but as we go forward in the future, we feel those things will begin to happen, and with that gets you have access to a little more federal dollars for funding and for airport projects and things like that. So these are very important things to keep track of.
Thank you. I do know that's getting a little technical, but it is interesting as you think about managing our airport and those 2020 numbers, or excuse me, the 2019 numbers that were creeping higher and higher to get us closer to that 225,000 enplanements a year. That was part of what was driving, I think, the FAA's approval of the funding to take us from just 2 main gates to now we'll have 6 main gates. So in a way, all that was great for us in 2019, even though 2020 and a good half of 2021, we're seeing a lot less air traffic, we are seeing that we're poised. We're poised for whatever's coming next. And as these new routes come in, it just makes it easier for us to be able to facilitate all of that. And the growth and expansion in our TSA area, again, we're poised to be able to expand without batting an eyelash, so to speak. So I do have a theory that, again, keeping with this theme of marketplace just for a moment or two longer, but I have a theory, Rick, that the pandemic allowed for a nationwide reset. As Rick explained, we have just a finite number of providers and a finite number of planes or aircraft, as you call them. And so there may have been some routes that weren't terribly efficient. They might have been even on the decline, phase of their life cycle. And we, on the other hand, are an ascending airport in terms of our growth. And so this allowed airlines to be able to pull back when no one was flying, or relatively hardly anyone was flying, pull back and redeploy their resources to where they thought they were going to be most fruitful. I'm just wondering if there's anything to that line of thinking. Are we benefiting from the pandemic in that way?
To quickly answer your question, yes, I think they are. But to backtrack a little, I wanted to explain also, the mayor mentioned something she was here a few minutes ago about the FAA approval for expansion and the federal funding. I want to make sure, and I don't think I touched upon it, that that federal funding, these airport improvement projects we're doing, the terminal project, is all funded by the federal government, by the FAA, but it's not by tax dollars. And I think we all need to understand that you pay your taxes to the federal government, or we all do. None of that goes to the airports. The airports are funded through the Airport Improvement Program, which is funded by commercial service users on ticket sales. So when you ever go, you buy your ticket, there's a tax in there. It says Airport Trust Fund, and whatever that dollar amount is, all that money comes back to the Airport Improvement Program. So no federal tax dollars support airports, except during kind of what we're doing during the pandemic now with some of the CARES Act. But normally, so that's all paid by user fees. Now, to touch upon what the mayor talked about, a reset, yes, I totally agree. I think that there was a kind of a nationwide reset, that airlines got a chance to resize themselves and evaluate their efficiencies, and looked at markets that might have been, as the mayor said, either on the decline or marginally performance. They're making enough, they're kind of breaking even. You don't want to rock the boat, but they took the opportunity during the pandemic to resize everything and look at emerging markets that could have a possibility for better success.
There is a little bit of interest, not on the Facebook page, but I got a couple of texts actually, in the Air Service Development Advisory Committee. And we did identify, the council did identify that as that revenue guarantee was approved by the council, that they really wanted to have more eyes than just Rick's eyes or the council members' eyes, but they wanted to have some business eyes on the contract and how it's performing, how that route is performing, I guess, and what our obligations are under that contract. The ideal scenario would be that the route to Seattle is so successful and that Alaska makes so much money that there is never a need to dip into that revenue guarantee fund at all. And you need some business eyes on that to make sure that we're definitely doing all we can to promote the success of the route. So can you just talk a little bit about what you might expect that committee to do, how they might interact with the city council? Because the city council actually, by law, is the fiduciary entity that takes care of managing and has that responsibility of ownership. And so the council makes the policy decisions and makes the budgeting decisions. But this advisory committee would probably be external to city government, but we would invite them to have that play that advisory role. And I know you touched on it, but can you elaborate?
Sure.
Thanks.
Yes, and this is probably one of the things I'm most excited about is, everybody's looking for assistance. I mean, I don't pretend to know all and be all, that's for sure. But I think this Air Service Development Advisory Committee, or whatever, I don't think we've, tacked down a name yet, but it'll advise the airport using their business knowledge, travel professionals. It'll advise the airport to watch specifically this one revenue guarantee, but what the future will hold also. What businesses are needing for the next routes. So I think, like anything else, like the mayor mentioned, we're very hopeful that none of this money is used, and we're pretty sure. I mean, you never know 100% of anything going to go on in life anymore. I think the pandemic taught us that. But, we have very minimal risk with this Seattle route. Even to break even, we've got to fill only about half of the planes. And so we're very excited, and we think it's going to be very successful. But that money that the city has provided will be transferred to a separate account, interest-bearing account, that if we don't use it for this route, we can have seed money for maybe another route. And with the business assistance to maybe for the Air Service Development Committee, committee members to maybe assist us in gaining pledges from business leaders that are willing to kind of throw some skin in the game between what the city has provided, what business leaders may provide, and what we can continue to try to compete for SCASD grants. We'll have a lot of seed money to continue to grow our service with different routes every couple of years possibly. So we're hoping that this committee will be business leaders, financial people to be able to evaluate what's going on, make decisions on future routes, or make recommendations to the city council and the airport on future routes to work with us to make air service successful for the region.
Rick, I'd like to ask you a question that I asked you, a couple weeks ago, and that is, okay, so we've added 4 new routes in the last little while, and we already had some, routes to Denver and to Salt Lake and Phoenix through Allegiant, and I think we have a couple to California through Allegiant. But can you just tell me, how many routes can our market sustain? Can we continue to just develop and develop, or how do you know when you've saturated the market?
Well, I think that's difficult to, I can tell you what our past history is. We've evaluated everything up to today, but I think the region is growing faster than we can ever imagine right now. So it's hard to pin that down exactly, but, I use 2019 a lot for my examples because in 2019 we did a massive study. So using those 2019 kind of statistics and population, the Idaho Falls Airport could service successfully about 17 separate destinations.
Okay. You did touch on the study that the state had undertaken. There were some state legislators who were very concerned about that lack of travel between their airport. I believe one of the members of the legislature, Senator, is it Johnson, from the Lewiston area, was saying, "Hey, look, we've got an airport here, and we see a lot of people driving to Boise, and why can't we fly to Boise? And let's study this problem." And we, of course, have had that same kind of conversation here. We've got an airport. We've got people who want to go to Boise. Why can't we have a flight? So the legislature did set aside some money. They did create a study committee that did meet all last year. And they had airport executives. Rick was one of them, and I think the Boise director. They also had business persons and at least one other legislator. So they had, a well-rounded committee to sort of take a look and ask these questions. They hired a consultant. They produced a study. And anybody who's interested in this question or this topic of the Boise, or a flight within the state of Idaho in general, I would definitely commend the study to you. It's very readable. But, and it's about 30 or something pages. It's not terribly long. But that study did conclude that, and Rick did touch on it, but that the 2 routes that would be most viable would be Idaho Falls, out of the 8 airports. Well, never mind. Out of the airports that they looked at, and I don't know why I think of 8, but anyway, out of the airports they looked at, they decided that regionally the 2 most viable would be Idaho Falls to Boise, and then I think it was Coeur d'Alene to Boise, Coeur d'Alene to Boise, and so Rick, can you just talk a little bit about, even with those 2 out of all they looked at, they looked at Lewiston, they looked at Sun Valley, they looked at Twin Falls. But out of all those that they looked at, those two are the most viable, but they would most definitely need not a revenue guarantee, but a subsidy. Can you talk about that in depth a little bit more so that people understand, and maybe also touch on the bill that's going through the legislature right now to create an air service or intrastate air service program, and they're asking for $1 million to create a program within the state to keep eyes on this very thing.
Yes, so there was 8 airports studied for flights from those airports to Boise. Idaho Falls being the most viable, and then Coeur d'Alene being second, and the rest of them kind of fell, in order beyond that. But even with that, even with Idaho Falls being the most viable to establish service, it would still require a subsidy of about $800,000 a year just for that one route a day from Idaho Falls to Boise. And Coeur d'Alene being a little more than that. I don't remember the exact numbers. And the other 6 airports being well over $1 million a year each. So a long-term subsidies, basically the state would have to come up with transportation dollars to continue to fund this for many, many years until maybe it would mature, maybe populations would grow enough, things like that. But anything in the foreseeable future will require millions of dollars a year subsidies from somebody. So the state legislature has a bill in right now, I guess they're out of session right now, to establish a fund for this subsidy. And they're asking for $1 million this year to continue doing some of the studies, to use some of that money to investigate further air service. But you just have to be careful. Where's the continued money going to come from? You don't want to put any more taxes on passengers at the airports. That borders on being illegal through the federal government, and can you really do that? So where our concern is where the future funding would come from that would support this not really viable service, at least in the near future. So that would be something I would caution everybody to really pay attention to and ensure we're making the right decisions. Because if we're going to start having, my suggestion, and remember I'm only one person, if we're going to start having some kind of funds available for air service, it should be able to use for air service both within the state and connectivity to other areas of the world that would help grow the economy. That answer, that okay?
Yeah, when we start talking about using tax dollars to subsidize air travel, I do think we have to be really shrewd about whether or not we want to do it, and then if we do that, what we want to be subsidizing. And I really liked that concept of working on the economy. So let me we're nearing the end of our time, but I wanted to there are a bunch of things I could still talk about here, but. The airport improvements that are going on right now, you mentioned that those are largely funded by the FAA, and I believe it's a $93, 93 cents on every dollar comes from the FAA, and about 7 cents, and there's a fraction in there somewhere, also comes from, or does come from the local airport, and those funds are not tax dollars. Those funds come out of revenues that Rick can describe in a moment. But the improvements he mentioned, number of gates, and prior to that we improved the baggage claim area, and prior to that we had added a restaurant service upstairs, or that hot food snack bar. Prior to that we'd expanded our gates, or our check-in area, with more gates there. So definitely a lot of things happening. But when the airport opens up, not only are we going to see more gates and a different configuration and more elbow room for TSA, but I think the lobby itself will be somewhat transformed. You'll see the city's logo, not woven in, but definitely more prominent in the decor. Rick, do you want to just talk about the Idaho Falls travel experience? Will parking change anytime in the near future, or is it going to be the way it is for a while? Management or rates, will they change? And just talk about the experience and who pays for that upgrade. And then maybe that'll be the end, unless I see any more questions coming in. So go ahead, Rick.
Yes, we're very excited about the terminal upgrades. And yes, normally during normal times. Any airport improvement funds, any FAA funds directed to the airport is 93% funded by the federal government, 93.75 actually, and what is 6.25, whatever the rest of 100% is, funded by the airport revenues. None of it comes from the tax dollars. And we have many sources of revenue at the airport, from leases, airline fees, car rental fees, of course, parking fees, things like that. So we are transforming the terminal into a much nicer experience. We have taken the region into account, thinking about the falls and the water and, kind of our outdoor nature into the design. It'll be much more well-lit, much brighter, be an easier experience to navigate. We won't have as many small spaces. So we're very excited about that. It'll be a totally different concept than what we've been used to for the last, I don't know how many years. But when it comes to parking, we are looking at different options. Our current parking contract with our management company expires next year. So I think, of course, as the mayor mentioned, the council is the governing body, the fiduciary entity over the airport. We'll be looking at different options to manage the parking, possibly some other parking companies, possibly taking it in-house, all these type of things that we're going to try to make the experience better for the customer, easier, better, obviously more cost-effective, everything we can do. Hopefully we'll be able to work on it in the next few years. I just want to say thank you. If you ever have any questions, please feel free to contact either one of your council members, the mayor, anybody at the airport, and we'd be happy to help out.
Thank you so much, Rick. Rotarians, you've been educated a little bit more. Hopefully that wasn't too terribly dry and boring, talking about the marketplace that surrounds an airport and its operations. But thank you for your time. Next week we'll hear from Bear Prairie, the director of Idaho Falls Power, also known as the general manager of Idaho Falls Power and Idaho Falls Fiber Network. And so we'll see you next week. Thank you.